What happened next was critical. At George's urging, I went to a conference not unlike this one at the Flamingo Road Baptist Church in Fort Lauderdale. Dan Sutherland had written a book called Transitioning, about leading change in the church. A lot about the mistakes that he had made. But that conference changed my life, and it changed my ministry. When I left Fort Lauderdale that day, I'm driving up the interstate, and on my cell phone I called Jim and Kurt and Don. I had a hard time talking to them because I'm an emotional guy. They didn't understand everything I was saying to them, but they knew that something had happened to me and that life was going to be different when I got back. And it was. There's a song tonight that you're going to hear as a part of the concert that is the metaphor for the change that took place in me. And we'll share that tonight. I told the three of them that I could no longer do church as we had been doing it. I had lost a lot of the fear that I had. And I had come to believe that the work of Jesus is too important to worry about what everybody else thinks about you. In just a few months, Jane and Jeannie joined our staff. And 2 women will change a church staff. In good ways. Jeannie was a lay person, but she is an absolutely incredibly dynamic children's ministry. And Jane, who was a lay person in our church before going to Campbell Divinity School, is the absolute best at preparing and creating resources for our teachers to be the best that they can be. But as we began to talk, and I began to share what my experience had been, I realized that what I needed to do was to take that whole crowd and some lay people and go back to Flamingo Road. So I went to the deacons and asked for money to do that, and they granted that. And so we did that. We spent some time with Dan and others on his staff. We learned so much from that visit. Now you need to know, Flamingo Road Church was nothing like us, and we have become nothing like them, and they've become something different than they were then, just like we've become something different, but there are no parallels, except that going to Flamingo Road Church freed us up to think different. And that's one of our hopes and prayers for all of you. And doing this as a group proved vital to our process. One thing Dan Sutherland told us was that we talk about all the time. He said, the older the church, the slower you go in making change. Well, we're 202 years old now, but we were closing in on 200, and so slow did become the operative word, and you'll hear more about that in a few minutes. Because to lead is to take people to a place they might not otherwise have gone, or to a place they cannot go by themselves. It's hard work. Seth Godin has observed the secret of leadership is simple. Do what you believe in, paint a picture of the future, go there, and people will follow. Hey, Ronnie. There's a man who did just that. You'll hear from him later. Welcome. That's the late Ronnie Russell. So I'm going to tell 3 stories now that illustrate the power of this idea, to give you a sense of how we spent our chips that we had earned over a long time in the practice of ministry. Boy, time goes, doesn't it? In the late 90s, it became evident to us that we needed to make a change in denominational affiliation. Members of this church had been present in Augusta, Georgia in 1845 when the Southern Baptist Convention was founded. They held the convention in the late 1880s in our sanctuary. To divorce after 155 years was going to be difficult. We appointed a study committee of 25 people led by the son of former Southern Baptist missionaries to Africa. We included the critics, the advocates, and we spent a year. We had more meetings than you could imagine We listened to everything that everybody had to say, and in this very room, we had the biggest church business meeting we've ever had. We were packed in here, and we took a vote to no longer identify ourselves as a Southern Baptist Church. We weren't mad at anybody, but for us it became a matter of integrity because we had long had women deacons, we had women on staff, and it was just a matter of integrity. The vote was not unanimous, but it was 375 to 2. We lost a couple of folks, but that was an important decision for our church. Timing was everything. We waited a long time to do that. Second, after that decision, in the midst of yet another strategic planning process, the staff felt led to develop another worship service that featured contemporary Christian music. Yes, we wanted to introduce drums and guitars and synthesizers and all that. And we wanted to do it in a church house that at the time was 135 years old. And we wanted to do it in a church where the ministers had preached in robes for as long as anybody could remember. We wanted to do it in a church that has acolytes to light and extinguish the candles on the communion table. And we wanted to do it in a church where the deacons at the traditional service served communion with military precision. But the main reason we wanted to do it was to reach a group of people we could never reach with our traditional worship service. Now, we love robes and candles at First Baptist Church, but we love people coming to faith in Christ even more. After promising never to mess with the 11 o'clock service, which we've already done by moving it to 11:10, we got permission to launch the new service. And we spent 4.5 years figuring out how to do it. The older the church, the slower you go. We just couldn't seem to get it right. It was proving to be a much more difficult process than we had thought. Of all the changes that we asked the church to consider, this was clearly the most sensitive, most controversial, and most difficult. We only had one chance to get it right, and we had to do that. Knocking holes in the front walls of our historic building to install 2 65-inch plasma TV screens gave us all more than a little heartburn. Creating a praise team of excellence out of a bunch of amateur musicians proved to be a fairly big challenge for Kurt. The whole idea of that sound resonating in our building excited us and scared us to death. And as anticipation began to build and we got to the Sunday before we were going to launch the new service, Kurt realized that we were all messed up. We didn't have the electrical system to be able to do it right. And with tears in my eyes, I announced to the church we would not launch the new worship service because we had a problem. Next day, one of our critics called, said, "How much is it going to cost to fix them?" I said, "I don't know, but we're going to find out." 2 weeks later, we got a quote, $75,000. Called him and told him. He said, "I'll have a check to the church in the morning." To the best of our knowledge, that man has never been to the Journey service. But he believed in us, he trusted us, he believed in the mission, and he wanted to support it. Our last great adventure was our desire to purchase the county jail, which is the only other building on the block where the church is downtown. There are a lot of people who thought it was a bad idea because the building leaked like a sieve, and it is the ugliest building in America. You will witness that for yourselves. And yet they gave us permission to go ahead and try to figure out how to pay for it. And they were rightly concerned. We had just launched into the campaign to double the size of this facility, to build that 2-story addition on the front. And what happened next defies description apart from the hand of God. I see Claude Arnold back there, and Claude was a part of that process. He was part of a 3-man team that worked on this. The church bid $1 million for the old jail. A local real estate developer made an upset bid as allowed and by North Carolina law on the sale of public buildings. The only problem is he miscalculated his bid, and it was $50 short of what it needed to be. Claude called me, and he said, I think we just bought the jail, because the upset bid time had expired. His bid was an invalid bid. And if you want to hear what the county attorney said when Claude informed her of that, I'll let him tell you that. I'll not repeat it up here. And so the church had won the bid process, or so we thought. Soon after this snafu, the county commissioners reversed their earlier action and refused to sign the contract authorizing the sale of the building to the church. Local newspaper, TV, talk radio people, they had a field day with it. As though somehow the whole fiasco was the fault of First Baptist Church. On the rumor that we were going to turn it into a homeless shelter, one talk radio personality noted that if you think parking is bad in downtown Wilmington now, wait till all the vagrants line up their shopping carts down Princess Street outside the old jail if First Baptist gets it. One front page headline in the Star News, our local newspaper, asked of the church, what would Jesus do? It served to remind us that leadership gets tested in the crucible of public opinion.